for me and for many people in this room, the real question is how do we raise sufficient capital to fund this transition? With 150 billion of investment required by 2025, how do we unlock investor appetite?
Ultimately, the technology roadmap is valuable, but what we're driving towards is what is the cost that you need to get to, and what is the cost that opens up a huge TAM. And I think ultimately, like as investors, we love talking to all the enthusiastic entrepreneurs and learn about the story and the technologies, but ultimately is how do you drive profitability? How do you actually build a business?
As Europe and the US are looking to localize their battery value chains, this legislation is coming into place to try and ensure that that is successfully achieved. Europe, on the one hand, has put in place legislation which penalizes OEMs for not being able to localize their battery value chain, whereas the US is very much focused on subsidies and tax credits.
Inflation Reduction Act is something that everyone is talking about, and my personal view is that we all would be much happy if there were no subsidies at all anywhere.
Yeah.
So that would be the let's say perfect situation for us. That is the way how I see it, but it is not realistic. Obviously, there are always subsidies, and we need to do our best there. And here I perhaps have a view that obviously this IRA is now affecting this whole industry quite a bit, and still I also think that we don't fully perhaps understand that what are all the details related to that. There are still a lot of open question marks, and obviously it's a very topical item in Europe because the European Union just now released this Critical Raw Materials Act, and there has also been recent policy developments related to European state aid rules, and from our perspective, I think that it's a little bit worrying development because there is a real danger that European countries start to compete with each other's
with the subsidy rates.
With the subsidies. So there is this subsidy race coming, and it is not a good thing. But it will be difficult to avoid.
In Europe and North America in particular, we're facing, all of the three: reindustrialization, reshoring, and reinvention of existing industries. On one hand, on the other hand, the capital markets, in the broader sense of the word, are not acting as efficient channels of capital to those capital needs. In time it will happen, but the fact that there's only 4 of us here and not 15, right, or 25 or 35, that tells you something. I agree that incentives and subsidies create this disbalance and will create waste. But I'm sort of view I'd rather get to an imperfect state sooner and then fix it rather than not get there at all.
Some of the existing business models of the funding institutions need to be reinvented and reconsidered. But in the absence of that, I suppose government has to step in and support in some shape or form.
I think the war is not so much about the type of technology, but about the success in industrialization. Right? And I think everybody realizes if you have an installed base of gigafactories, right, you're not going to change that overnight for a new technology. So a new advanced battery technology needs to fit with the way gigafactories are now being made. And so that makes drop-in or plug-in essential for new technologies.
I see prices below 40 euros per kilowatt hour for mobile application and around 30 for stationary application.
The bottom line is over the next 10 years you'll see, as I say, consolidation, you'll see new entrants come and go, and you'll see some of the traditional companies that can't get the cost structure right basically going bankrupt.
I think that, clearly EVs are going to be a huge industry, and in 20 years' time, some investors are going to have made an extraordinary amount of money.
This content is based on information available at the time it was recorded and is for informational purposes only. It is not an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation, and no recommendations are implied. It is outside the scope of this communication to consider whether it is suitable for you and your financial objectives.